when does criticism stop being about, policy disagreements
Yeah.
and start crossing the line into pure, undeniable hatred?
Mm-hmm.
We are diving deep into the alarming escalation we're seeing right now, from major universities to city streets.
And it's more than just some academic question, isn't it? It's a really essential political and moral distinction we have to be able to draw.
So let's set the stage for this deep dive. The immediate context is key.
It is. Since the horrific terrorist attacks that killed more than 1,200 people on October 7, 2023, we've seen this rapid increase in public demonstrations and campus unrest.
And it's forced institutions everywhere to try and figure out what legitimate protest actually is and what it isn't.
Right.
Our sources today really reflect this urgent need for clarity. For starters, we have a serious government investigation here.
The House Committee on Education and the Workforce.
Exactly. They released this comprehensive report, and it's based on over 400,000 pages of internal documents.
An incredible volume of evidence.
And it exposed, frankly, monumental administrative failures at universities when it came to handling anti-Semitism. The report really details how some institutions just, they capitulated to hate.
And that failure of leadership on campus, it has this dangerous mirror image out on the street.
You're talking about that recent incident in New York City.
An extreme example, yeah. An editorial cited an incident in Queens. Demonstrators gathering right outside a synagogue.
In a heavily Jewish neighborhood.
Right. And they were chanting, "Say it loud, say it clear, we support Hamas here."
And the editorial was not subtle. It called this an ignorant, shameful, and flagrant abuse of free speech.
Well, of course. It's not just political speech at that point. It's an act of intimidation. And it's coupled with support for a designated terrorist group.
A group that explicitly calls for genocide. So that really defines our mission for this deep dive.
It does.
We're going to unpack the source material from scholars, legal definitions, congressional reports, to answer a critical question. How do we clearly define the difference between legitimate opposition to Israeli policy and contemporary anti-Semitism?
And to do that, you have to start with the foundational shift. The concept scholar Irwin Cotler calls the new anti-Semitism.
Okay, let's explore Kotler's framework. He defined 9 pillars, but the core shift he highlights is, it's just so important to grasp.
It really is. Classical anti-Semitism, you see, it targeted Jews as individuals.
Right, the kind of discrimination you might face as a citizen just trying to live your life in a given society.
Exactly. But the new anti-Semitism, that targets the Jewish people collectively. It doesn't deny the rights of an individual Jew in, say, Paris or London.
No, it denies the Jewish people's right to live as an equal member of the family of nations.
Precisely. It effectively treats Israel, the state, as the collective Jew among the nations. It's an exclusion based on national identity.
That distinction really simplifies the whole concept. The analogy used in the sources is perfect for this. Classical anti-Semitism is like bullying an individual student in a class because of their religion. But this new anti-Semitism is completely different.
A whole different ballgame.
It's like banning an entire family unit, the state of Israel, from the neighborhood and arguing their home should be torn down.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And we see this ideological exclusion showing up in very specific ways in our public discourse.
Okay, so let's look at 4 of Kotler's most critical pillars, the ones that are really dominating the conversation right now.
First up is political anti-Semitism. This is the denial of the Jewish people's right to self-determination. It's the delegitimization of Israel as a state.
So it goes beyond just criticizing the leadership.
Oh, way beyond. It's arguing the state itself is illegitimate. And this is often paired with attributing, all the world's evils to Israel.
And that kind of delegitimization can spiral pretty quickly into the next pillar you mentioned, genocidal anti-Semitism.
Exactly. This is where you get public calls for the total destruction of the state of Israel. And this isn't some abstract threat.
No, it's right there in the charters of groups like Hamas, which our sources mentioned in that New York incident.
Then you have the rhetoric that's used, which brings us to ideological anti-Semitism.
This is the constant effort to Nazify Israel, equating Zionism with racism.
It's a very heavy rhetorical move. It's where you see what's called Holocaust inversion get used.
And what we mean by that is the trope where critics draw these direct moral parallels between Israeli policy and Nazi atrocities.
Right. It tries to erase the unique historical trauma of the Jewish people by repositioning them as the new perpetrators of genocide. It just flips the entire historical narrative.
It's a profoundly dehumanizing act.
It is. And finally, that fourth pillar, economic anti-Semitism. This is embodied by the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movements, or BDS.
An attempt to use economic pressure to isolate and ultimately destroy the state.
But what's really fascinating here is where Cotler draws the line, the crucial boundary.
Between policy critique and something else.
Yes. Cotler stresses that labeling Israel an apartheid state actually remains within the boundaries of legitimate, though obviously fierce, political argument. That's considered acceptable critique.
Wait, okay, that's a really important point. So if calling the state apartheid is acceptable debate, how do people know when they've crossed the line from policy critique into calling for dismantlement?
The line is crossed when that label, or any criticism, really is used to conclude that the state must be dismantled.
Dissolved, pushed from the river to the sea.
Exactly. Once the argument shifts from seeking internal policy reform to demanding the existential destruction of the sovereign state, it becomes a racist denial of the right to exist.
It's the difference between saying this system needs fixing and
this entity must be eradicated. It's an ideology of exclusion, plain and simple.
that's a vital distinction, critique versus existential denial. But, a framework like Kotler's 9 pillars can be hard to use in the moment. So how do organizations, or even just ordinary people, actually use these ideas on the ground? And this brings us to the more practical tools, like the 3D test and the IHRA definition.
Precisely. We can start with Natan Sharansky's 3Ds test. It was really designed as a simple, effective way to check if criticism is turning into anti-Semitism in real time.
Okay, so let's break down the 3Ds, starting with the first one, demonization.
Demonization is when Israel or its supporters are characterized using old anti-Semitic tropes, or when criticism is just blown completely out of proportion.
So things like the historical blood libel depicting Israelis as organ harvesters or something like that.
Yes, or those Nazi comparisons we just discussed, that Holocaust inversion, when the rhetoric is just dripping with these ancient hyperbolic conspiratorial ideas. That's demonization.
Okay. The second D is double standards.
And this is when moral requirements are applied only to Israel that aren't expected of any other nation, especially not any other democratic nation.
The sources are very clear on this. It's about singling Israel out for condemnation at, say, the UN, while totally ignoring worse human rights abuses in authoritarian states around the world.
Exactly. The criticism stops being about universal justice, and it just becomes this unique, obsessive hostility.
And the final D, which links right back to Kotler's core idea, is delegitimization.
And this is the bottom line. Denying Israel's fundamental right to exist. It's denying the Jewish people the right to national self-determination.
A right that's recognized for every other people on the planet.
If you accept that right for every other group but deny it only to Jews, that is, by definition, prejudice.
So in terms of setting institutional standards, the source material points to what many call the gold standard for definitions. That's the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, or IHRA definition.
It is, and it's been adopted by the European Union and more than 30 countries globally. It has real weight.
And the IHRA definition is very explicit on this link to self-determination, isn't it?
It is. It states that denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination or claiming that the existence of Israel is a racist endeavor can be anti-Semitism. It gives institutions clear, specific examples.
And we should note, this definition isn't without its critics. Some worry it could stifle legitimate debate.
True, but the consensus among the community it's meant to protect is, well, it's overwhelming.
Right. An American Jewish Committee survey found that over 85% of American Jews and non-Jews agree that the statement, Israel has no right to exist, is fundamentally anti-Semitic.
And you see this translating into political action. In the U.S. Congress, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which mandates using the IHRA definition.
It passed in the House by a huge margin, 320 to 91.
The institutional trend is clearly moving toward codifying these standards to ensure some kind of accountability.
So if that's the background, what does all this mean for the campuses and streets we started with? The demonization and the double standards, that rhetoric is leading directly to tangible, harmful failures.
Oh, absolutely. That Education Committee report detailed an unbelievable breakdown of standards. Look at Northwestern. Administrators there entertain these truly outlandish concessions to protesters.
Not just policy changes, but ideological surrenders.
Yes. Demands to hire an anti-Zionist rabbi.
And to remove Sabra hummus from campus cafeterias. That detail is so revealing, isn't it?
It is. It shows the absurdity of the concessions they were willing to consider, moving from political dialogue to managing, dietary and religious purity tests.
And beyond just pandering, there was an active failure to protect students.
Look at Harvard. It intentionally omitted any condemnation of Hamas or even an acknowledgement of the hostages right after the October 7th attacks.
And even worse, at Rutgers, they were cited for uneven enforcement. They actually disciplined Jewish students who spoke out against the harassment they were facing.
It's a total erosion of the academic environment. You're creating a situation where Jewish students are punished for speaking out against anti-Semitism.
It turns the whole idea of safe spaces completely on its head.
And we see that same ideological exclusion happening through economic means, like the BDS movement.
Right, and we have to reiterate what the sources say about this. BDS is overwhelmingly seen as a problem by the community it affects.
It is. 86% of American Jews view the BDS movement as being infected with anti-Semitism. This puts it squarely in the category of Cotler's economic anti-Semitism.
An effort to demonize and delegitimize. And finally, let's go back to those horrifying street-level threats, that New York City incident.
Protesters outside a Jewish institution chanting explicit support for Hamas, a terrorist group seeking the genocidal eradication of Israel.
When you have people physically targeting a Jewish space and calling for the destruction of the state, that's not policy critique.
No, that's just raw genocidal hatred. And when these acts are framed as just anti-Zionism, but they involve intimidating Jewish people in their own communities, the distinction becomes meaningless.
So what's the synthesis here? What does all of our source material tell us?
It's clear anti-Zionism in its contemporary form is not just sharp criticism, it's an ideology of exclusion.
One that denies the Jewish people a basic right self-determination that's recognized for all other nations.
And when that opposition consistently uses tropes like blood libel or Nazi comparisons or these double standards, it's just replicating historic anti-Semitism.
And there's a final piece to this, a kind of toxic feedback loop that protects this prejudice.
Yes, scholar David Hirsch highlights this recurring strategy. He calls it the Livingstone formulation.
And this is when someone is legitimately charged with anti-Semitism, and they immediately dismiss the accusation.
They dismiss it instantly. They claim the charge is a dishonest, malicious attempt by a shadowy Zionist lobby or Israel lobby to silence them.
It's an ad hominem attack. It shifts the focus away from the behavior and onto the person making the accusation.
Exactly. And that dismissal, that focus on a Zionist lobby, is part of the problem itself.
Because of the historical resonance.
Hirsch argues that this strategy, accusing those who fight racism of being dishonest conspirators, it mirrors older, central anti-Semitic conspiracy tropes.
Like the idea of a global Jewish conspiracy controlling finance or politics.
The Zionist lobby becomes a modern update of the Elders of Zion, and it creates this toxic loop that shields the prejudice from any real scrutiny.
So it weaponizes the fear of Jewish influence to shut down legitimate criticism of anti-Semitism. The question we want to leave you with today, building on all this, is this. When does the vehement denial and deflection of an anti-Semitism charge become just as concerning as the original prejudice itself?
Because that denial, that's the new battleground we're all watching unfold.